Let's hear about the world media from these two. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We were trying to debate whether we should be wearing sunglasses or not, whether we're inside or outside, but we've decided that we're inside.
Yeah,
so
obviously if it's
we
inside,
haven't got them on.
it's rude to wear them, so we decided
Exactly. So a lot of you are being quite rude.
not. You're the rudest.
Look, yeah, see, look, intimidatingly rude. Can we just start at the beginning, Caitlin, with your, tell us a little bit about how you came to write for the Times.
Well, I want to start with how weird it is to wear bare feet on a yacht at 9:30 in the morning. Like, normally if I had bare feet and I was on a yacht, I would presume I'd been up all night. And this period of the morning would be a blackout, and I would not remember what was happening. So yeah. Oh, I hope we're all enjoying our feet. Who feels bad about their feet now they're looking at them? Yeah. These things are great, though, aren't they? I do love a conference. Just kind of everybody getting together in one place from across the world in order to feel paranoid and unhappy about other people having a better hotel room than them. That is why we're here today. Yes, how did I start as a journalist? Actually, I just remembered, the last time I was here was about 15 years ago when I came to Michael Gove's wedding.
Oh, my God.
One of the more unusual episodes in my life. And I was sharing a villa with a columnist who I can't name, who was over-refreshed and excitable. And which me saying that is saying something. And when we got back to the villa, the person, whose gender will remain mysterious, decided that they wanted to spray the room with champagne like you do on Formula One. But we looked in the minibar, and all we had was a bottle of Bailey's liqueur. And that's quite a creamy and viscous substance, not made for shaking and spraying, but we managed it anyway. And the subsequent damages bill was quite vast, so yes. How did I start as a journalist? I won my life in a competition. That's why I always tell kids who want to be writers to enter competitions, because they really do work. Newspapers are sitting there going, we'd like people to write for us. Let's just have a competition like Cinderella and see who wins. So the Observer did a Young Reporter of the Year competition, which I entered and won. And they gave me a column for the duration of the summer holidays, which was amazing. But they didn't run the last column that I'd written. I opened up the paper that weekend and was like, where's my column? It's not there. And I rang them up and was like, you've got to run that column. I am poor. I'm from Wolverhampton. I've promised to buy my brother some bunk beds, and my siblings are starving. Please run the column. They were like, we can't run it yet. And so in the kind of huff that you can only have when you're 17 and annoyed with a national newspaper, I then went to the newsagents around the corner, picked up a copy of the Times, found out the Times' fax number, and faxed that copy to the Times with a covering note going, well, the Observer haven't run this, but I think you should. And they rang me up half an hour later and said, would you like a weekly column? And it literally took me 20 years to realise that that's not normally how people get jobs on a broadsheet. I was telling the story to someone younger who wanted to get into media, and they just started crying halfway through, going, no, that's not what happens now. And then years later, I was trying to work out why the Observer hadn't run that last column. Like, why would they not have run that column? It was a brilliant column. Why would they not have run that column? And I researched in history, and that week that they didn't run that column was the week that the war in Iraq broke out. And they had clearly had to clear a column about a girl sitting in the middle of Wolverhampton town centre looking at boys that she fancied in favour of covering total war. So I do understand that decision now. But yes, the Times has kept me there ever since, which I find quite extraordinary. It's
And whatever it is now, 23, 24 years later.
it's passed in the
hold on,
blink
you
of an
said
eye.
Yes.
Yes.
A lot's changed, including the paywall.
Yes.
You expressed some views when the paywall, as did some other columnists, first went up.
Yes.
How did you feel about it then, and how do you feel about it now?
Well, at the beginning, we were all quite huffy about the paywall at the Times. We were like, we'd sort of sit there on Twitter and we'd see friends who worked from The Guardian with their pieces going viral. And we'd be like, why don't I have a piece going viral? Zoe's going viral. I'm not, because I'm behind the paywall. And then we noticed gradually that loads of our friends at The Guardian were being let go and not having their mortgages paid anymore. And then we became very happy about the paywall, which we thought of as the mortgage wall and the safety wall and the I get to feed my children wall. But I mean, a lot of us didn't realise at the time how big it was going to be, and what a huge change it was going to be. I can remember the week that the paywall was going to be put up, I was walking across Hampstead Heath, and in the kind of Richard Curtis-esque coincidence that no one would believe, I just bumped into fellow Times columnist Giles Corran, and he went, "What's this? The internet's coming, I hear." Giles, not so technical at that point. What does it mean? I was like, well, it means that we're going to have to get on Twitter, because it means that our writing will be behind a paywall, so the only way we're going to be able to communicate with people is by going on Twitter. And Giles was like, "What is this twatter? I don't know about this at all." Quickly explained the internet to him, quickly explained electricity to him, quickly explained Twitter to him. He was like, "Okay, we'll do that." And then he went on and was an absolute success at Twitter, immediately threatening a child with death for playing their drum kit too loudly. But that worked. You know, that's what you've got to go out there to do to shill your stuff. And so at the beginning we were very anti the paywall, but now we're kind of like, we're the last group of people left in the media who have secure jobs, and we are very glad of that paywall now. We kiss that wall. Mwah. It's like the wall in Game of Thrones. It protects us from the White Walkers who want free content. No, you cannot have free content.
Because the last couple of weeks has seen a real surge for newspapers, but for the Times particularly, is 13% up. I guess because people are thinking about Brexit and finding it confusing. How do you see the role of newspapers versus social media at important times like this week?
Well, the key thing is with social media, when it started at the beginning, everyone was like, well, the great thing is it's just infinite voices and infinite information and infinite opinions and infinite reporting. Like, kind of finally the world can talk to itself and we can all find everything out and know what everyone's thinking. And then after you spend 2 years knowing what everyone's thinking and everyone's saying and infinite opinions, you go, you know what, actually that's not what I wanted. That is, I don't have time to listen to infinite opinions and infinite information. I want to go to some people that I can trust who will tell me what the hell's going on. And this is what you see sort of during Brexit now, kind of like, in Britain we've been asked to make a gigantic decision about something huge that we've never understood anyway. I mean, for the last 20 years you say Europe to anyone in Britain, they're just like, yeah, I got nothing. Literally, I've been there on holiday. Other than that, I don't know. I mean, it's got to the point where I was having a conversation last week with a couple of my friends in the pub, and we were at this point Brexit was in the lead, and my friend Bob Stanley from the band T&P𝑚 posited that it was the reason that Brexit was leading at that point was because Brexit sounds quite a lot like breakfast. And that simply sounds delicious. And we're not really thinking about the realities of seeding from Europe, but we're just thinking lovely sausage, and that's... Similarly, he was just going, well, maybe Nigel Farage, we're thinking, word association there, it's forage. He's foraging in a forest. A word association with all these things. So this is how little information we have to go on, that, we're basing Europe on a breakfast. So when something like Brexit comes along, you just, because this is the problem with social media, it's ruled by kids. There aren't really any tribal elders there. If you could point to one thing that's wrong with the internet and social media, it's that often when things blow up and everybody's fighting with each other and screaming and shouting and there are death threats, you're just going, where are the mummy and daddy of the internet to come and tell everyone to calm down? These arguments go on forever. No argument can ever be won or lost on the internet. They just go on forever, and it's absolutely exhausting. You go, where's mummy and daddy? Well, for me, my mummy and daddy are, Danny Finkelstein and Matthew Paris. Phil Collins, those are the people that I want to read in the Times. Whatever Matthew's saying, that's probably going to be right. I trust him more than any other voice. So where are mummy and daddy? Mummy and daddy are still in a paper. Mummy and daddy aren't on the internet. They don't have time to post pictures of cats. This is why I'm not mummy and daddy. I do have time to post pictures of cats. If someone's crudely photoshopped a picture of Benedict Cumberbatch holding an otter, I will retweet the fuck out of that. That'll be my main job for the day.
Do you think, when you're writing for the Times, last weekend you wrote about masturbation, for example.
Say it again. I love it when posh people say masturbation.
I knew... Do you know what? I had a bet. How far into this would I get without being called out for being posh?
Actually...
Actually a bit further than I...
I thought you were going to say, how long will it be till we mention masturbation? I was going to say, this is a world record for me. I'm usually straight in there the first minute. When I went on news...
It's a big part of being posh, masturbation. It defines us.
When I went on Newsnight, the first question that Kirsty Walk asked me was, Caitlin, in your new novel, you open with a 14-year-old girl masturbating. Why is that? To which the only reply I could think of was, it's a relaxing way to kick things off. But then I realised that it made it sound like I was now about to start masturbating on Newsnight at the beginning of my interview, and it all kind of went wrong from there. I didn't start masturbating. It was Newsnight. I would never do that.
So without
Sorry.
saying the word again,
Yes, sorry, that we've done that now. Yes.
is it different talking about it in the Times
Yes.
to in social media?
Yes, the key difference if I'm on, I kind of live on social media. I've got like 500,000 followers. Yeah, all right. But the key difference between posting stuff on social media and writing for the Times is you simply have to engage your brain when you're writing for the Times. On Twitter, you can just be kind of like, spaff, spaff, spaff. You don't even need to check a fact. You can just say this stuff and get away with it. In the Times, if you say something, people will pick you up on it to the point where, when I do events for the Times, people will come up to me and talk about specific columns that I've written and sort of go, it's absolutely delightful. I really enjoyed it enormously, but I must pick you up on one tiny point. And you're like, okay, well, what are your qualifications? And he'll go, well, currently working on the Human Genome Project, so I did want to pick you up on a couple of little things that you said in your column. You don't get that on Twitter. You just get Troll96 going, your mum. And as a consequence, you tend not to raise your game. Whereas when you're writing for the Times, you're very aware that, the people who do shit are reading this. I will get, the eternal surprise of writing a column, and then 4 or 5 days later, someone contacted me on Twitter going, they're mentioning your column in a debate in Parliament. Someone is quoting something that you've said. Someone going, I am in a cabinet meeting about something that you've just been quoted here. We're in a meeting talking about policy. Your column has just been quoted. That's not what's happening with the stuff that I'm writing on social media. Yeah. Again, I'm quite hurt by that because some of those Photoshop pictures of Benedict Cumberbatch with an otter were high quality stuff, and I, for one, am sad they're not being mentioned in Parliament.
In terms of your writing, you've talked about in the early days how you used to sort of comment on things, I guess, observe things, and then more latterly you've started to suggest alternatives.
Yes.
Writing.
Well, yeah, I kept being offered comment columns when I was like 17, 18, 19, because I guess they thought it'd be funny to have a teenager writing about stuff when teenagers know nothing. But I was very aware that I knew nothing, so I wanted to wait a very long time before I basically knew that I had to wait until I had 52 opinions a year on something. That's the only point you should start writing an opinion column. And also, I realised that I was complaining about things more and more as I got older, partly because you learn more about the world, partly because your knees hurt more and you feel a bit more crotchety. And one of my big beliefs is that if you've been complaining about something for 3 minutes, 2 minutes ago, you should have started doing something about it. And the whole idea of a column, and there are many reasons why columns exist, and why you are paid to write. One is that most people don't have time to think about stuff, and you should be, so you give them an opinion. You pay for your paper, and in return, you're given some opinions that you can either agree with or disagree with, or third option, start a conversation in a pub going, did you see what Caitlin Moran wrote yesterday? And one person goes, yes, it was rubbish, and the other person goes, no, I agree with it, and the third person goes, let's be reasonable, and that's a Liberal Democrat. And so that's one of the things that you're paid to do, is to give people, something to talk about, a kicking off point for a conversation, a way through. You're paid to give people a different angle at coming in at things. Very often arguments tend to split into, I think this is good and I think this is bad. And I always try to do the third thing of going, well, how has this happened? Or what would happen if this continued happening? Or just simply boggling at something. To give a new angle, allow people a new way of coming into a subject that previously they would have gone. When I write about serious subjects like abortion or rape, usually columns about that tend off to be, well, I think this is a bad thing. Not many start off with, I think this is a good thing. But we tend to see that column over and over again, so I always try and make sure that the first paragraph will give people a different way into it. A chance to reassess the way that they think about things and sort of frame the argument. So that's another thing that you're paid to do as a column. And the third thing should be presenting possible futures. There's a beautiful creative element to writing a column that you can sit there and go, what would happen if we tried this? Why don't we try this? Is this a different way of looking at something that happened in the past? And just sort of, giving people in a 5-minute break while they're eating their breakfast, just a chance to just for a minute imagine what the future could be like and whether they'd like to go for that or not. That's my favourite bit of it, other than the pictures of Benedict Cumberbatch.
You said as you get older, that getting older is a good thing.
Yes.
Because you give fewer fucks.
Yes.
How will that sort of guide how you're writing? Does that mean you'll take on, because I just think over time you've taken on more and more subjects that probably in your earlier writings you wouldn't have,
Yes.
And you're probably one of the very few writers that will still do the otter.
Yes.
And Syria.
Yes.
Are you more, are you more interested in tackling bigger subjects, or are you just as interested in the
I think
Otters.
both are equally important, and I think it's very hard. It's very easy to underestimate how important it is to just write something that's funny and that cheers people up. I try to sort of do a balance of the two. Like sort of half the columns are sort of serious or trying to look at something sort of from a different point of view. But it's really important to remember, because the key thing, most of what I write about is equality, how we need equality, and that the whole idea about equality isn't that it's some luxury that we can afford ourselves. Kind of like, well, women will be equal and people of colour will be equal in the future when we're all a bit richer and it'd be easier to implement. So we will not get richer until we have equality, because this is a very tiny planet with a lot of problems, and the biggest resource that we have isn't oil or gold or uranium, it's people's brains. And the more brains we can get involved in solving the world's problems, then the quicker we will have our solutions. I'm a smoker. If there's some Pakistani girl on a council estate in Wolverhampton who, because of her poor education, has the cure for lung cancer in her head, but is not going to be able to go to the right university in order to be able to hook up with the right pharmaceutical industries in order to be able to give me that cure, I'm going to be very angry. That is my ultimate argument for equality. It's in our interests for the world to be more equal. And the whole point of, once we've achieved equality, is to remember the primary reason why we exist, which is joy. We are here for such a short period of time. There's the void before and the void afterwards. We're here for a tiny little flicker, and we should be experiencing as much joy as possible. So, to be able to write a column that makes people just for 1 minute just go, wow, what an incredible world this is, that's quite funny. Yes, I do fancy Benedict Cumberbatch. These are just as important as talking about politics.
Do you think the media, writ large, doesn't focus enough on the positives you've just described? I mean, we were talking earlier about last week, politicians, for example. It's been very popular for the last few years, probably since the expenses scandal, to portray politicians as a bunch of thieving scumbags who are on the make. And then last week happens and suddenly you start thinking, oh, maybe there's a more optimistic view of all of this, and that maybe these are good public servants, but that we only ever focus on the negative. Is that a disease that the media sometimes suffers from?
Well, absolutely, and the whole thing is about cynicism. Where we have become very cynical. The tone is relentlessly cynical, and it's like, well, why do people become cynical? It's a teenage thing that you do when you know that you don't know that much, and so you just become cynical. Like, and everyone's trying to screw me over. I'm not going to believe in stuff. I'm not going to be stupid enough to trust in people. I'm going to be cynical. And you basically put on your leather jacket and your shades. You put on your armor to protect yourself from accusations of not knowing that much and being innocent. But the problem is, when you put your armor on, initially that will protect you, and you'll look strong and tough and brave. But the problem with wearing armor is you cannot grow in armor, and you cannot dance in armor, and eventually your cynicism just leaves you pinned to the spot. And we can see that has happened exactly with talk about politics in America, in Europe, in the UK now. We've become so cynical about democracy, become so cynical about politics, that we're talking ourselves into uninventing democracy. We've come to a post-factual age where we're just entertainers and hucksters who shout the loudest to be the people who are representing us. We've stopped reporting how well the system actually works for us. I mean, it's got to the point now that the last book that I wrote, Manifesto, was trying to get people talking about politics again, allow people to be able to engage with politics in the spirit of hope and optimism and information. Because it's got to the point where if your child came downstairs now and said, Mother, I've decided I would like to go into politics, you would treat them as if they had just come downstairs and gone, Mother, I've decided I would like to become a massive pervert. And it's taken us all of human history to get to the point where we have a representative democracy with people from a local area representing people and being servants of the people. That's a beautiful idea. If we had the best people and the best brains on the job, people like Jo Cox, this would clearly be a better country. The thing is, there are lots of MPs like Jo Cox, but we don't report on good things at the moment. We only report on things as they're exploding, as we go over the precipice, as we're too fucked to do anything about it. But this is the best time it's ever been to be a human being. All the stats on violence, on murder, on life expectancy, on wealth creation, this, without a shadow of a doubt, it is the best time to be a human being, but we don't really see that reflected anywhere, and it leads again to this pessimism and this cynicism, and this is why people turn to social media, because they can just go in a little closed group, talk to their friends, just kind of comfort each other like children sucking their thumbs. It's a confident media that is able to say, no, look, the world is getting better, and that's one of the things that, that I do. Matthew Parris is so good at doing that, just kind of going, calm down, it's all going to be okay, this is all right.
Let's move on to social media, because a few years ago, in the early days of social media, you were very excited about it.
Yes.
I think you said, for the first time ever, thanks to the explosion of social media, the world can talk to the world unmediated. And I think you felt this was a huge democratizing effect, and that the Stormonts and the Westminsters and all these other privileged places that you often rail against would come tumbling down, and social media would democratize everything. How do you feel about that today, a few years on?
Well, what I understand about social media is now, when it first came out, I still think it's the most incredible. We still haven't even begun the social media revolution. It's absolutely extraordinary because for the first time in history, human beings can talk to each other unmediated. And if you imagine being in space and looking at the Earth, as we've started to communicate with each other online, the Earth has started being able to join up, and it would look like a human brain. And you would see all these synapses firing up and making connections. Here you can talk to people all across the world. It would look like a brain lighting up. But this is a very infant brain. We are only just learning what it is to be able to talk to each other, to suddenly have all these voices in our heads at the same time, to be dealing with people who are radically different with massively different opinions. And so this little toddler brain of the Earth, of an interconnected humanity, is so young and untrained and often dangerous at the moment. It is like a baby. Social media will be suddenly prone to massive rages and screaming and shouting and stuff, but then can be soothed with a picture of a cat or someone's lunch. This is exactly how a baby works. So we have to understand that, it's an amazing idea, but we're still in the very infancy. We mustn't write it off yet, and it's very important that people don't retreat from it. A lot of women that I know, in the public eye, understandably have left social media because there were so many rape and death threats. I've had them as well. But you just make a decision, no, that those voices need to be there. I'm just not going to go. Because, I want to be there and help it grow up. Social media will become a toddler. It will learn to walk, it will become an adolescent, and then eventually it will become an adult thing where we will finally have learned what it's like. Basically, being on social media is like being a TV presenter. You've got your headpiece on and you've got all these voices in your ear. People are talking to you constantly. You're having to broadcast, and that's a skill that you need to learn. TV presenter, Philip Schofield's been able to do it for a very long time. But, we as people on Twitter are having to learn it in real time. It's difficult.
What responsibility do you think Twitter and the other platforms have, though, in this growing up process? Because, there is there's a lot of people who've talked about leaving Twitter. I think a lot of them who've done that and came back
Yes.
2 weeks later.
Yes.
But
everyone loves Huff, so that's fine.
But beyond that, again, back to last week, this level of hate, the trolling for our children,
Yes.
etc., this, as we saw, is pretty serious stuff. What do you think Twitter should be doing about this?
Well, the problem is it's all about tone, isn't it? And the tone was set when they didn't do anything about those attacks. The problem with Twitter is you can't have it both ways. We keep being told it's still one of the most influential platforms in the world, that, it has a putative value of however many millions. And then you talk to them about, employing some staff to monitor things and, track down trolls, and we can't afford it. It's like, you're either one of the most talked about, huge corporations in the world, or you're not. You can't have it both ways. You can't be like, we set the tone for everything and that's where everybody is. Oh, but we can't afford to employ 3 people to stop people having murder and death threats. So work out which one you are. It's still a brilliant idea, but to me, Twitter seems absolutely endemic of that statistic that it's something like 94% of all programmers and people in tech are men. And so we're only creating a world around a male mindset and things that would be useful to men, because that feels like a very male platform to me. I think if women were inventing a social media platform, it'd be very different. It would be much more discursive. It would give you space to talk about these things. It wouldn't be so combative. Social media often runs like a computer game, and people just fighting. People go, yeah, I won the internet. The fact that there's a phrase, I won the internet, tells you everything you need to know about the internet and the gender balance at the moment. How can you win human interaction, conversation and progress? That's not a winnable thing. That's a we're all in this together thing. So whenever I do talks to younger girls, it's like the key thing you've got to do is go in there and learn how to program. Because at the moment, the stats are so gigantic, over 90% of the programmers are male. This is like if we knew in 20 years' time the universal language of this planet would be Chinese and only men were learning it and women would be locked out of the conversation. We form ourselves, we learn what we are through social media. It's that McLuhan thing, the medium is the message. The way that we communicate, who we think we are, will largely be predicated by the technology that we use. And if women aren't in there inventing it and seeing things from a women's point of view, it will again be an entirely male-dominated world. And for the first time, it doesn't need to be. This could be a world that women could be dominating in. Wouldn't that be amazing to see for the first time, if we started from scratch, how things would be if women started it? Would we have a completely different value system?
One thing we should check, I think between this boat and the end of the jetty,
Yes.
there is one boat after another full of, I think, probably men, but we can check, all of whom write programmatic code. So one of the big themes down here in Cannes this year is computers, I suppose, and programmatic. And for those who've been coming here for years, there's a whole number of companies on boats that you've never heard of
But they've got a lot of balloons.
With a lot of
That
balloons.
tells me
yeah,
they're powerful.
that helps them.
Yeah.
That helps jolly them up a bit. Talk a little bit about algorithms and computers and libraries.
Well, this is the modish thing, isn't it, to go, well, I've worked it all out with an algorithm. Like, the algorithm is the truth. It's like, yep, absolutely, I just run God, and he's run an algorithm, so this is definitely the way we should be doing things. And the thing is with algorithms is, they're bullshit. It's the difference between a library and Google. Like, it's, okay, so, when people sort of go, well, children don't need to go to libraries anymore. They've got the internet. They can simply Google for facts. Okay, if you Google for something, you will be sent to the most popular search term and the most popular reply to that, and you will be going to a thing that everybody else is directed to. So everybody is suddenly herded down the same lane, and you have a mono-knowledge and a mono-culture. Nothing surprising happens to you if you're looking for things on Google and looking for things through algorithms, because that's what it serves you. You go to a library and you're looking for some information. First of all, that's a curated space. Rather than it being the most popular thing, you've got the best things in there. You've got a librarian who will show you, who knows you and will show you the things that you want. You know this librarian, you trust them. As you're in there, you're browsing, you're picking up books you never even knew before. Suddenly, you've got a completely different choice of knowledges that you can tap into than everybody else. We are all curators. There's an infinite amount of information out there. What makes us absolutely unique is the things that we love and the things that we have learned and the things that we trust, with the things that we've made ourselves up with. If you're only ever going on the internet and through Google and using algorithms, you're being served up the same stuff as everyone else. You go out there and find something yourself in a library, then you will have a completely unique knowledge set. You will have a completely unique set of references, and that again is the difference between social media and blogs and having a newspaper. That has been curated for you. That is an unusual collection of ideas and opinions that is unique to anywhere else. You will not get that that bank of knowledge and that collection of people and the interaction that they have with each other as well. And there's something very, very beautiful about being in a gang on a newspaper. If you look all the way through history, the points where we've progressed the most and where creativity has been its most exciting, it's when there's been a group of people, all roughly equal, who are all kind of in rivalry with each other, but also working with each other. In the 60s, that huge explosion of bands, it's all the Beatles riffing off the Stones, riffing off the Beach Boys. They're all equals, but they're all watching each other. Okay, where can I go now? Talking to each other, borrowing things. Let's go up now. Through the Renaissance, through the Enlightenment, it's the same small group of people. You're all watching each other. There's something very powerful about a gang, and that's what you get on a newspaper. When we all go out and see each other, or we're watching each other reading our columns, you're kind of like, okay, you've managed to do that. Okay, I can go a little bit further over here. Very unique collection of ideas.
And in the wider gang, including your readers,
Yes.
do you feel safer, happier, more protected in the comment that you get when you're writing in the Times than the comment that you get when you're at large on the internet?
Oh gosh, well I've got a lot of friends on the Guardian, and I love the Guardian, but I think they made such a massive mistake a couple of years ago when they had sort of below the line comment, and comment is free, and they kind of encouraged readers to comment on what writers have done, because what you're doing there is you've got your writers, as a newspaper you go, our writers are the key thing about us. This is amazing. You put that writing there, they write their hearts out, and then the Guardian is paying for this massive space where people come along and trash what the writers have done. Just hundreds and hundreds of Troll 69 just go, I think your piece is shit, you smell, your mum. And, they've run the stats on this. It's women and people of colour who get the most trolling there. So you're just, the very voices that you need to be protecting are being the most attacked because of this absolutely bizarre setup where your readers are trashing your writers. This seems absolutely bizarre to me. It's as if, you bought the football rights and you had the match on the television, and then you had viewers at home who were drunk on a scrolling ticker tape across the bottom of the thing going, this is a terrible match. Who cares about football? All these footballers look gay. The resolution is poor on my television. Fuck you all. Why would you do that? That's absolutely bizarre that you're giving this space to trash your brand, and that's another beautiful thing about the paywall card. You as a writer, they only, because all the, the people who are leaving comments on the Times website, they cannot be anonymous. We know who they are. You actually get people who want to contribute to the conversation, just going, again, it's me again. I was working on the Human Genome Project. You've made the same mistake again in your column, Caitlin. Yeah. You get to know them that way.
Now, as you said, others might want to contribute to the conversation. Where's
No one
Eleanor?
ever wants to ask a question.
Eleanor might like to ask a question.
Eleanor will ask a question.
Or Tiffany would like to ask a question, I know.
I want to ask a question. Where's that dress from? I love it.
Oh, I was admiring your dress. Is it?
Pana.
Back to my friend Hannah. Is it Roberto Cavalli or is it ASOS?
This? Oh, it's a new designer called Samantha Sung.
So much cooler. So much cooler. But I wanted to ask you about feminism. Why did it take so long for this
knackers, isn't it? I mean, I do blame the Spice Girls. It was, I don't know what the average age is in the room here, but like, it was great in the early 90s. We had Riot Girl, you never had to wear makeup, there were no hairstyling products, we just walked around in Doc Martin boots and a t-shirt shouting "Part Life." It was amazing. And then the Spice Girls came along, and at the time we were like, oh, this will be fine. Like, yeah, it's, you know, it's cabaret, it's tits and ass. You know, it's kind of, you know, it's like this weird sort of girl group. It's completely sort of, you know, recidivist, but I'm sure it'll be fine. And then before we knew it, Britney Spears was there in a bikini with a snake, and it had all gone tits. Because what had happened is that people stopped using the word feminism, and they said girl power instead. That was the huge thing, kind of like when the Spice Girls were asked about how they felt about being a woman and politics and, you know, and progress and stuff, they went, no, we're not feminists, but we believe in girl power. And the problem with girl power is that compared to feminism, which is, you know, a legitimate movement, you know, with solid aims and legal aims, which should bring in legislation and a history and a way of debating these things, which is inclusive and includes everybody and has, you know, solid objectives. Girl power, on the other hand, just meant being friends with your friends and buying Spice Girls records. And that notably fucked us for about 10 years, because kind of hard to build a utopia based on that, particularly as the quality of the singles went down towards the end of their career. So that was basically it. I mean, it's really weird, kind of like, I'm just reading a biography of Mary Wollstonecraft now, who wrote Vindication for the Rights of Women, and you know, it's just amazing. She's basically saying the same kind of shit that I'm saying now, then, and everyone was like, oh, and then when I wrote How to Be a Woman, people were still going, oh, and that was 200 years later. We forget these things really quickly, which is why it's always good to keep being chatty about the feminism. You know, don't leave it for a couple of years and just think, yeah, I'll be all right for a couple of years. You've always got to be on the feminism. You've got to be riding it like a little horse, just kind of like, come on, let's keep going. Hillary for president, let's do this.
Eleanor.
Well, on the subject of the feminism and riding the horse, we're at Cannes, which is all about advertising.
Yes.
What do you think about some of the attempts the advertising industry have made to try and ride that feminism horse, things like the Dove campaign?
Yes.
The campaign for real beauty
Yeah.
and
Does that
always like a girl. You see these things?
Well, I always feel a bit bad about this. I start thinking, God, am I too reasonable? My children wouldn't say that, but maybe I am. Because when I have conversations with all the feminists, all 19 of them when we go to the pub, most of them seem to be really down on things like the Dove campaign, just going, oh, it's horrific tokenism and rah, 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 and who are they to say what a real woman is? What a horrible phrase that is. But I'm okay with tokenism. I think that's a step forward. It's the same. You know, obviously it's not the ideal, but it's better than what we had before. It's the same as with racism. You know, obviously the worst bit is when people are thinking racist things and saying racist things. But then if you move on to a point where people are still secretly thinking racist things, but they know not to say them anymore and not to shout at people in the street, that's still not ideal, but it's definitely better than what we had before. And it certainly seems to be moving you to a point where people are both not thinking and saying shitty things. So that's why I'm fine with tokenism. It just feels like a step in the right direction. I think one of the problems...
I'm not sure Unilever are going to be describing their campaign thus at any of their seminars this week, but we were thinking...
yeah. Better than total racism, but still not ideal. Have that quote for free.
Said the panel of judges as they gave it. It's lion.
But the thing is that, like, I mean, this is one of the problems with kind of, you know, coming from the left and being progressive, that one of the problems that we have on the left and being progressive is we're like, well, if it's not perfect and if it doesn't include everybody straight away, then fuck it. We will trash these people. Kind of like, I'm holding out for a feminist Jesus who'll do everything, or, you know, for, you know, an equality Jesus who will address every single issue. That's never going to happen. And, you know, you just need to reverse it for a second and go, you know, are the men waiting for a man Jesus to come along and do everything for all men? That's just, you know, that's not what we're waiting for. So little bits of progress at a time. I'm happy to do that. The world, you know, infinity just needs to be chopped down into little bits. You know, we've all got to, you know, when you're tidying up the house, you don't do it all in one go. You know, you just start with the sink and work your way around to the toilet. That's what it's like in progress.
There are lots, I think you're talking to them later on, but there are lots of aspiring vloggers and social media influencers.
Train for a job that's more productive and lucrative.
And lots of them, a good number of them are down here because brands have become fascinated by them. They don't really fully understand them.
No.
But they're fascinated by them. What advice would you give to those aspiring young influencers to be?
Oh my God! You know what? I mean, I think it's far bigger than you think it is if you want to be a writer now. You just think like just getting paid a little bit would be the key thing, but what you're actually going to have to do is basically unionize and change the industry to a model where people get paid again as a matter of course. Like kind of, it's not going to be enough for you to just be able to, you know, this is part of the fragmentation of society. It's like, well, if I find a way to get my blog to, you know, to give me a little bit of money or get me a little bit of leverage, that's all I need to do. No, I think you're going to have to collectivize, unionize, and change the industry back to a model where people got paid properly, because otherwise the entire industry is going to disappear. You get offered ridiculous things, like kind of, and the thing is, it fucks you up as a writer. If you want to be a writer, if you want to be known for a voice in the things that you say and the things that you do, and you're not being paid by a newspaper, but you're having to hustle with blogs, then you either go out there and write really clickbaity shit that will gradually just erode your brand and your voice because people just see you being venal for cash, or you'll be offered kind of tie-in sponsorship stuff. Like I was approached by a company, I won't say who went, Caitlin, you've got a YouTube channel, it's very successful. We will pay you £30,000 if you will sit in front of a camera and open a box and then react to whatever's in the box. Well, I know what's in the box. It's my tattered reputation. I can't do that. I kind of like, I can't do that. You know, I am lucky enough to be paid by newspapers, so I don't need to do that. But if I was a blogger, that would probably be the only way that I'd be able to pay my rent that year. And that's, it means that, you know, that no voice can be trusted because everybody's having to work a way to shill, you know, and to sell things. You know, it becomes advertorial. You know, I mean, that's a huge thing in the media now. You know, papers that, you know, online sources that do not pay, people who do not pay their interns. You just basically go in there and rewrite press releases for companies and place it on your website. Yeah, that's a, you know, most of the young journalists I know do that now, and that will be a huge thing in the future. That's a time bomb waiting to explode, because once you start infesting what should be free comment and voices that you can trust, once people realise the extent to which this is happening, you know, people will lose trust in you know, huge sections of the media. You know, it's just good to stick to the old model. I think sometimes you get the model right, and I love the paywall, man.
Let me invite the audience for anyone who'd like to ask some questions.
No one ever wants to ask questions.
Don't
So
they?
what I always do is
Hold
sing
on.
until someone...
At the back there. Chris.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Well, I have been Googling ticket to Mars cost question mark on Google for the last couple of months, because if he wins, that is basically the start of the apocalypse, isn't it? Yeah. I genuinely know a group of people who are looking at buying land in the centre of Canada because they fear the apocalypse so much, and I'm chipping in. Yeah, apparently that's the best place to be. This is the big conversation you have in slightly paranoid circles, because you're furthest away from a massive geopolitical split, furthest away from the oceans in case of the rising sea levels. The land there is fertile and the people are reasonable. So that's my tip for everybody. If Trump gets in, middle of Canada.
It's true, though. Canada, we've got our Canadian friends over here. Canada.
Can we come back with you? See, this is how reasonable they are. This is amazing. Literally, never met before. I'm going to live with him now. Okay, everything they say about you is true. So reasonable.
Anyone else? Oh, here we go. Alan.
Hiya! Oh, for them to invent cigarettes that don't give you cancer. I'd really like to in any way be part of that project. That is my primary thing. I mean, I would like to have changed the world a tiny bit, but I will settle for absolute immortality if possible. It's just not the same. I like the pain. The vape doesn't give you the pain, sadly. But yeah, no, I mean, if I could totally change the world, that'd be amazing. I'll settle for immortality. That would be fine. Yeah. And you had spitting image, so that just made it fun. Yeah.
And there was kind of opinions and people had a view, whereas now it's all very middle, maybe a good way, I don't know. Is that why, you know, young people in general, I use it, you know, loosely over 30, 20, whatever, are not interested?
I think a lot of it's just not to knowing the history of it. Like, you just think, you know, I mean, I have to battle with myself the presumption that I've had since I was a child that is that in order to be in politics, you're like born into a political family and you come out in a political egg, and then you go to the political schools where they teach you the political language, and that's kind of, and they're the politics people. You just don't think it's going to include or involve you. You know, on a council estate in Wolverhampton, the idea of like in any way being involved in politics just seemed so absolutely distant. But once I started reading my history, and you realise, you know, you read the history of the Labour Party, that's exactly what would have happened. Just people got together, talked about the kind of policies that would be good for them, you know, sent MPs to Parliament. So, you know, and once you start telling kids about that, like kind of, you can get involved in this. It's like voting in X Factor, but with even bigger results. They start getting really excited about it. Like, it's that kind of, you know, you sort of, you know, young people as well want to do things. You know, they want to contribute. They want to see themselves as part of it. And at the moment, we do not see politics like that. You know, if there was some way that you could have some kind of thing like the guides or the brownies that allowed children to start off learning about politics and being, you know, interactive in their community, and how you can, like, where the gears are, where the levers are, what the languages are that you then go on and change things. But instead, for most kids, it seems like such a jump from reading about politics or seeing about it, you know, on the news to actually understanding it and being involved in it, that they just shut off completely because there's a million other things to do. They've got Crash Bandicoot to play. I don't know if they play that anymore. That was what I was playing when I was a teenager. And they've got pictures of Benedict Cumberbatch to look at. I understand their priorities, but, you know, if we want to change the world, they need to feel that they can be involved in it.
What?
I've got an advertising question.
Yeah.
Can
And also a lovely dress.
you,
Thank you.
can you tell us one thing that advertisers should keep doing and one thing that advertisers should stop doing?
Oh, well, I'll tell you what they should keep doing. Oh, God, is it the Ribena advert where there's all the hedgehogs and then there's the cats and it's going along and then there's balloons? Because that's the inside of my head. I've watched that advert about 40 times, just going, that's literally, finally someone has mapped the human mind. That is the Human Genome Project. It's the Ribena advert. So more funny stuff, like kind of, and the great thing about advertising is you can, people know what an advert is, so you can subvert it in such an amusing way. I mean, I'm always for the rebellion and the revolt and stuff, but we know what the tropes are of advertising so much, so every time someone like twists it and subverts it, you're kind of like, yes, this feels exciting, this feels good. You know, I love adverts. Who cannot still sing the, the Weetabix advert song from the 1980s? It's the Weetabix. You know, these are our popular cultures. So just make them more fun. Just make them more fun. More hedgehogs singing and dancing.
Anybody else like to?
Caitlin, you must have had so many people write to you over the years about things you've written, and you talked about the negative stuff and the fact check stuff. I just wonder, on a more positive side, any people that have written to you that have just made your heart sing or really cheered you up?
Oh God, so many. Oh, it's just crackers. No, it's you know. I mean, I've got boxes of them. Like from, I can't work out what I like best. The kind of the classic Times reader of a crusty old colonel in Surrey, who will just go, "I read your column on abortion. I have always, disapproved of abortion, but the way you have explained it to me about women needing to take control of their lives and their lives being ruined and then ruining the lives of their children has completely changed my mind." You get so many of those because you're a young left-wing person, maybe the only one that they've ever met in their paper, talking to them, and you can change their mind. But then so many, my main audience is girls, young girls who come up to you, who are, broken and sad but amazing, who just go, when I write your column, it just makes me feel like I exist in the world. What they usually say is, you took how I feel and you finally managed to make it into words and sentences, because you have an emotion first and then you build sentences around it. And that's the thing most people don't have time to do. You walk around with this knot of emotion in your stomach, and if you're a writer who's halfway worth their salt, what you should be doing is going, I will transcribe, I will decode what that knot of tension is and emotion in your stomach, and I will give you the words to explain it to yourself so you can start explaining it. So those girls are amazing. And then you get the occasional amazing nutter letter. My favourite one being from a man, apart from the man who wanted to make a hole in my petticoat and put his private parts through it. He writes on a very regular basis. He has a very specific vision. But my favourite one was the man who very, very confidently took issue with me saying what the population of the UK was and went, you've quoted a statistic of 62 million. I can tell you, it can't be more than 24,000 tops, and that's a fact. And sometimes I think maybe he's right. Maybe half of Britain's here now. Maybe that is what is happening. Yes.
the working classes. Do you think that maybe this kind of world that we live in now, where we give away so much content for free and people expect so much for free, is actually perhaps stopping more working class people getting involved in media and having jobs in media?
Yeah, well, you don't even need to say perhaps. Obviously, you know, I mean, the first rule of, like, you know, are you going to see people represented is, you know, is bitch got to pay rent. You know, if people cannot pay their rent, they will not enter that industry. What you will get is middle class kids who are supported by their parents, who can afford for them to be supported while they go and do a free internship or get a foot on the ladder. If you're a working class kid, if you take that free internship, you're still going to have to work a full-time job in order to pay your rent. So immediately you're going to be exhausted when you finally do get round to writing. You know, your middle class rivals are able to write twice as much because they've got the time, they're not working a full-time job, and immediately within a year a massive gap has opened up. You're going to see half the working class kids dropping out. It's the same all across the creative industries. It's the same in television, you know, it's the same in film, it's the same in theatre, it's the same in acting. We're just not seeing working class voices and kids coming through. And again, you know, I could talk about the unfairness of that until the cows come home, but it comes down to the fact that we're just going to make things very boring. Things already are very boring. When we do a documentary about this decade, and when the BBC do a bang-up job about this decade, the first thing they're going to be going is like, here's our clips package, what banging pop tunes that describe what was happening at that time are we going to put over it? You know, in the 80s, you know, you've got the specials, you've got Ghost Town, you've got Madness, kind of, you know, you Britpop in the 90s, you know, you can soundtrack a decade by the songs that are there now by working class bands who write literate lyrics describing what's happening now. That's one of the jobs of the working classes. What would you have now? Absolutely fucking nothing. There are no working class bands anymore. You can't afford to be in a band. You can't afford rehearsal space. You're not allowed to be on the dole anymore. You know, you can't afford to have 5 people in a band. It's all solo artists, you know, on little keyboards singing in quavery voices because they, you know, just because they're in a wardrobe and their mum's going to stop them recording in a minute. You know, you've got that, and then you've got everybody in the club tonight, hands in the air, like you just don't care. Those are the only 2 songs that we have. Like, kind of, you know, we're not telling our story back to ourselves. You know, all these voices are missing. It's the same in television. It's the same in acting. We're not hearing these voices. And it's fucking boring. You know, if we were going to do the Olympic, you know, if we get the Olympics again in another 20 years, you know, a bang-up job Danny Boyle did of telling us how Britain is brilliant and how working-class culture in Britain is brilliant. If we have the Olympic ceremony again in 20 years' time and Danny has to come back and do an update on that, he'll get to the bit of the 2012 Olympics and then it'll be the bit of what happened next, and there'll be fucking nothing. You know, we can literally just put the test card up and go, you know what, nothing else happened for another 10 years because no one came through, nothing exciting happened. You know, you know, it's the decade that we all agree was the most exciting ever was the 1960s. Why were the 1960s the most exciting? Because it was the first time the working classes came on stream culturally. You know, they'd been raised by that post-war generation. They went to university for the first time for free. You know, they had benefits there. They had the time and the education and the confidence, you know, and a demographic swell that meant for the first time the working classes came on tap culturally. And they changed it. They blew it apart. They made things completely different. Working class culture is different to middle class culture. I'm writing a whole book about it now and I won't bore you, but it's palpably different. You know, and we need as many different kinds of culture as we can possibly get. And at the moment, this is obviously and predominantly a middle class culture. It works well for me. I get to be the token kind of, you know, ghetto child on the corner. But, you know, I'm very aware that it's quite lonely. You know, I'd like some more of my guys to come along so we can sit in the corner talking about drinking on the back of a bus.
I do kind of agree. I think that internal culture is or could destroy creative industries.
Yeah. No.
What can or should be done about that to get more?
So glad you asked me because I had a big drunken rant about this at the Glamour Awards last week. I was talking to my friend Lauren Verne, the BBC DJ who also has formed her own company, The Pool. It's an online resource about women. It wants to be an alternative to sort of the glam magazines that we have. And one of her key things was we will pay all our employees. There will be no free internships. We will offer everybody a living wage, unlike nearly everything else, and particularly a lot of online startups. And I was talking to her about how this, at the moment, unfairly puts her at a disadvantage because obviously it's costing them huge amounts of money. Everybody else is just using free talent. And I was going, but that's exactly wrong. It should be the other way around. It should put you at an advantage. There should be some kind of ethical kite mark for companies that lets you know which are the companies that are actively paying people, promoting talent, not just because it makes them look great and sexy, although it will, but because you know that you're going to get a greater diversity of voices there. You know, you're only going to get the talent that you pay for at the end. You know, you can scrimp and save and get away with it for 10 years, but at the end, you're just going to end up with the same group of white, middle-class, straight people, because they're the only ones who can afford to be writers or broadcasters or journalists, and it's just going to sound the same as everything else. Whereas if you've got an ethically marketed company that can bring, diverse voices on, who will say new things and interesting things and exciting things and challenging things, then that's an advantage to your company. You need to let people know that. So I copyrighted the idea of an ethical kite mark. I will be selling this idea for my customary fee of £777,000 because bitch got to make rent.
Take one more question. No one's got one, otherwise I shall ask it myself.
I want to know
sorry.
who's realised today that their feet are actually quite lovely. Has anyone looked down and gone, actually, they're quite lovely? I'm not doing that. Mine have gone purple now. 'Cause I'm modest.
I put one over the other since you said.
Yeah,
what do you think of
it's
your
like
feet,
kind of,
and then
yeah.
tried to tuck them behind there.
Men with bare feet. Now you know how women feel about their entire bodies when people start saying, are you beach body ready? Enjoy a tiny little bit of our panic and dysmorphia now as you look down at your cracked heels and go, I'm disgusting. We feel like that's about our entire bodies all the time.
Gideon, last question.
So that's my second favourite question I've ever been asked after someone just going, so, being a woman, how's that going for you?
E-books they surprise a lot of people by seeming to hit quite a low ceiling.
Yes.
Not going completely taking off, and both to write and to read. Obviously, digital is wonderful. We can read so much.
Yes.
There's some limits to the physical way we consume what we read.
Well, two things about ebooks. One, as far as I understand, because last time I had a drunken rant about this, someone told me some facts. One, the ebook market is pumping itself because Amazon will not release their sales, so that you can amalgamate ebooks into the main book sale charts. So, as far as authors are concerned and publishers are concerned, those are invisible sales. Even though you could be selling 15,000 copies a week on an ebook, it's not registering in the main charts. It just registers in a separate ebook chart. So it's kind of like you've got to. If you're selling a book, you're selling a book. It shouldn't matter what format it's on. This is absolutely crackers. It'd be like having a chart that was like the cassette charts, the vinyl charts, the CD charts, the download charts. You know, they've known to amalgamate them all in. That works best. And secondly, when you buy a print book, you should get a free download of that book onto your Kindle. Because, again, that's what you do in the music industry. It makes complete sense. You know, when you're at home, you get to read your big... at home, Wolf Hall in hardback is doable. On a bus, on hardback, that is difficult. I will need to read that on my Kindle, or I'll break both my wrists and walk around like this for the rest of my life. So these two things would make it a lot easier. You know, both are useful. You know, kind of, the amount of times that I've just been bored on a bus and I can just, on my iPhone, read a book. That's a beautiful thing. That's the beautiful thing about technology. You need never be bored. You need never be alone. You know, lots of people go, is it bad for children to spend all their time on social media? If you look at what my kids are looking at, they're just talking to their friends. You know, that's I'm spending exactly the same amount of time talking to my friends at their age, but I was on a phone. And then when I got a bit older, I would then have to go to a club in order to meet people. And because I was socially anxious, I would have to get very drunk and smoke cigarettes and take drugs. And you can see now that that's not what the new generation are doing. They can talk at home when they're not socially anxious. And as a consequence, drinking, drugs, smoking, they've all just fallen off. Those are the crutches we needed to go out and meet in the meat world. Whereas, being able to sit at home with your makeup on and your pajamas, drinking a cup of cocoa, being able to go off and Google a fact before you sort of put it in a reply to make it look like you knew that all along, but you didn't. Much more relaxing way to talk to people, incredibly civilised. We wouldn't want it to be binary, one or the other, but it's a brilliant addition to our socialising repertoire. Plus, it's how you meet a lot of fruity people.
Does it? Do you worry about their attention spans a bit, though, in the way they... I'm just thinking, I've got similarly aged children, that they consume very short bites of content. I often find with my children, we can't listen to a whole song or watch a whole thing, that everything's in little clips.
But maybe that is the future of human brains. We used to sit around and listen to symphonies for like 19 and a half hours. We'd be like, yeah, gotta do me the ring cycle now, bring it on. And then we went through prog rock, and that was a bit smaller. And now singles are 3 minutes, and that's what we think a song should be. We think a song should be 3.5 minutes. For kids, maybe it is only just kind of the chorus. Don't bore us, get to the chorus. Why not just have the good bit? It's like carb free. Yeah, it's like a sandwich. They've just taken the bread off and they're eating the delicious ham or cheese. Like, kind of, maybe that is the future of humanity. Maybe we are going to fit loads more in because we're only taking the very best little bits.
Does that mean there'll be different formats if e-books have hit a ceiling? Will there be short? Do you think there'll be different formats for books? Do you think shorter?
Yes,
shorter
there'll be
novels?
e-books that you just open it up and it just shouts hello, and that's it. And it will be, and you'll be like, yes, I've read my book for today, and that was very delicious. Thank you very much. Word of the day. I'm done now. Yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you very much.
Goodbye.
For spending the morning with us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dave. Thank you. We can put our sunglasses on now.
Yeah, we'll put our shades on.
Yeah.